So if you had kids that were 16 years old now, Ray, and they said, Dad, what do you think, based on everything you know about the future, what should I be doing?
First of all, there's the question of what matters most in your lifestyle. So I'm going to get philosophical, not assuming that the highest income is the best. Okay, because happiness, you want happiness and health. And so, in answering your question, there's very little correlation between the amount of money you have and the level of happiness that you have past a basic level. And so I could answer your question first, which the obvious way is to say to earn the most amount of money. And I want to start off in saying that, my experiences and so on is like I love being in nature. And it doesn't cost me hardly anything. I mean, it depends where your pull is. And so don't lose sight of your pull and what it's about. What you want to do is you want to get above the level that you don't have to panic. We just earlier discussed how many months can I live, and to be able to secure that and to be excited and have that passion or that whatever it is, the life that I want to have. So I just want to emphasize, keep in mind of that. But then also, my principle is make your work and your passion the same thing, and don't forget about the money part, right? So know your nature. This is what I tell my grandkids, okay? Yeah, you have a feel and you also have a nature. It's not just your preferences. People think differently. Some are more adventurous. Some are less adventurous. Some are more conceptual or artistic and can think with imagination, and they love doing that. Some people don't like that. Some people want to make life should be more concrete and more certain and so on. That's your nature. You're a lot born with that nature, and you also learn it in your earlier years. We know this of how neuroplasticity works and so on. So we are all on a journey to find the match between our nature and our path. And you find that path, but you can't forget about this money part
So
while
on
you're
that point,
pursuing that path.
don't forget about the money. So if your, grandkids came to you and they said, I want to become a lawyer, would you say, listen, that's forgetting about the money because I think AI might take that job? Or would you say yes? Would you, if they said, I want to
I think
I want to do a thinking job?
let me say that history has shown that it's not the most intelligent people or the most intelligent species that are the most successful. And it's not necessarily those that work the hardest, although these things are very important. It is those who species and people who are also most adaptable. And so there's going to be great change in your lifetime. Okay. And so, yes, today it's artificial intelligence. But if you went back not long ago, we didn't even know artificial intelligence would exist the way artificial intelligence today exists. And the future will be like that. So when you're nailing it down, it used to be make sure that you know how to code. And then Claude Code comes along, and all of those who are coding are worried about their jobs. Okay. So what is it that matters? Okay. It is the approach to life in a sense that produces that, the general understanding and also the adaptability. I think a lot has to do with knowing yourself. That's why in building Bridgewater, the personalities of the person were very important in what suited their jobs. And then I built this a personality profile test. Then I made it online for anybody to go take. It's about 30 minutes. It's free online. It's called Principles U. That'll tell you a lot about your nature. Okay. But your goal is to find that nature and what are the paths. And there are several paths, and they're constantly changing to find that nature. Okay. You'd experiment, you learn. Okay. But you probably were pulled into this job by your nature, right? And so, and you made it work. And here it is. It works in all of those dimensions, and it's like that for everybody.
Yeah, it's interesting because you look forward to the future, and I think if I was a young person at this stage and I was trying to set out where to aim my career, I would be more confused now than ever before, especially because they're also contending with this unemployability crisis amongst entry
Okay,
levels.
but if you're talking about you'd be confused because you can't anticipate the future, that's right. That's just the way it is, right? And if you say, what is it that I need given that reality? Okay, I need to learn, I need to know how to maximize the use of tools like AI to be able to increase what I know, and how do I use that to the best of my ability to be as useful as possible doing things that fulfill me.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's what you need to do. You're asking what you need to do. Just get over the fact that you don't know what the future is going to be like. So if you're looking for an answer, is it going to be a computer programmer? Is it going to be this or that? No, just maximize your ability to know, which is so easy to do nowadays, right? So maximize that, and then use that to maximize your usefulness and in jobs that make you happy. And that's the thing that that's the best I can give you in terms of more my 16-year-old. That's the best I can give them, because I don't want to mislead them that it's the thing, that it's the particular job. Okay, that'll mislead them.
You talked about this 80-year cycle, which results in this new world order. And it sounded like you were saying that near the end of the cycle, you see wealth inequality and you see the Gilded Age where some people have lots of nice things and other people at the other end are struggling. And this is a function of capitalism.
First of all, it's a reality that it's not only just a wealth gap difference, and if the majority system is not working for the majority, well, you're going to have a problem. And yes, it's contributed to these things where one wants to create more opportunity through education and through other basics, that there's a certain level at a floor that nobody should go underneath, because it's bad for them and it's bad for the society. And just to embellish on that point, my wife and I live in Connecticut. On a per capita income basis, I think it's the second richest state, but 22% of the high school students have either dropped out of high school or are failing with absentee rates of greater than 25%. And as a result, a lot of it is gangs, shootings, drugs, and so on, that leads to a lot of incarcerations. And the bill for incarcerations has become larger than the education budget. When you have that kind of cycle and so on, the system has to work for most of the people, and so on. So you have that dynamic, but it all comes down to productivity. And so the way I look at it is the government run by almost anybody can't make these things run well. I mean, governments do not make things run well. So what is it like to give them the money and expect that they're going to make things work well? And so you look at this set of circumstances and you say, who is going to make it work well? And I don't know the answer. And these are budget considerations and so on. You have to prioritize the things that make it work well. And you know what that is? That is educating people to be productive and civil. We don't talk enough about civility, how we work together to be able to achieve a productive result. And the way these cycles go, it's more likely that they're going to have a big fight and we're going to have, a debt problem and those kinds of things, than how we're going to come together and work out how to achieve this environment which takes care of wonderful education and productivity of people and all of that to make the society work better for most people. And that's the way it looks. And that's what's happened.
Capitalism leads to inequality, it seems.
Yeah,
So,
that doesn't have to. There are some societies like in Singapore, some of the Scandinavian countries, some societies, there is a floor that everybody can have good education, adequate housing, and adequate health care, the foundations, okay? Because if you go below those levels, the society will pay terribly for it because those people will become liabilities, not assets of the society. They'll be disruptive.
So what about wealth taxes? Because this is the big debate now. The big debate in the UK at the moment is tax the rich. It's been all over our news over the last couple of weeks. The big debate in New York and LA is wealth taxes and tax the rich. Good idea, bad idea?
It's a very difficult idea in the following ways. I'm just talking about the mechanics. They have to sell the wealth, and that contributes to get the money to pay the taxes. That's one of those things that can cause the bubble to burst, as we're talking about.
Mhm.
And then operationally, it's very difficult, unlike if they did it as stepped up tax bases. In other words, right now, when you die, your capital gains gets put aside, and you don't have to pay capital gains taxes, you pay inheritance taxes. And there are ways that you can raise taxes and not hurt the economy. But we do have to realize that it will lessen investment, because what wealth is mostly used for is to put it into investment. So you have to do this with at the same time, the improvements in those that are going to improve productivity, like education and so on. If you're just making transfer payments, wealth payments, and you undermine the productivity of the society by doing that, in other words, you're just giving it for consumption and so on, and the money's going from what was capital expenditures and those kinds of investments that make a better, more productive society to go to, in a sense, consumption and so on that doesn't produce that productivity, that's going to be a problem. So you have to think, how do you make people productive, and how do you make your society productive for most people? Or you're going to have to find a way where you say that other group of people who is not productive, the overall society can have a higher level of productivity, but we're going to still establish this bottom that I'm talking about, the bottom in education, the bottom in conditions. And then you have to say, who is capable of doing it? Building a society that will be productive.
Who is that?
Well, as I say, you have this dynamic problem that typically a privately owned, capitalist-owned business will do better than their government counterparty.
Okay, so a business is more productive typically than a government entity.
That's system.
So entrepreneurship. You need entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and capitalists. In other words, people who are capable of making the thing they're responsible for productive. Okay, run efficiently. So you need those indisputably. And if you're doing that in government, you need that in government in order to be able to do it. And government has its own, first of all, it doesn't attract many of those people. And then it also has, by its nature, knowing many people have gone into it, it is almost dysfunctional, as it causes all of this arguing and problems. So those who want to be most productive tend not to go there. And also, it doesn't distribute well. These people they're not on the ground. They don't have the direct contact. They don't know what it's like. As I'm describing, I see this
Politicians.
The politician who says, I'm going to, so you still have to come back to the question, who's going to make it run efficiently?
This is something that I've made for you. I realize that the Diary of a CEO audience are strivers, whether it's in business or health. We all have big goals that we want to accomplish. And one of the things I've learned is that when you aim at the big, big, big goal, it can feel incredibly psychologically uncomfortable, because it's kind of like being stood at the foot of Mount Everest and looking upwards. The way to accomplish your goals is by breaking them down into tiny, small steps. And we call this in our team the 1%. And actually, this philosophy is highly really responsible for much of our success here. So what we've done so that you at home can accomplish any big goal that you have is we've made these 1% diaries, and we released these last year and they all sold out. So I asked my team over and over again to bring the diaries back, but also to introduce some new colors and to make some minor tweaks to the diary. So now we have a better range for you. So if you have a big goal in mind and you need a framework and a process and some motivation, then I highly recommend you get one of these diaries before they all sell out once again. And you can get yours at thediary.com. And if you want the link is in the description below. What is the UK currently a cautionary tale of?
It's the classic cycle. They have gotten over indebted, underproductive, and they've run out of choices. In other words, there's not enough money. Okay. And because there's not enough money to do all the things, then they've gotten this internal political conflict going. And you've had 6 out of the last 7 years, you've had a new prime minister because somebody else comes in and they got their promise. And the promise doesn't pan out, and it doesn't take long to be that I don't believe your promise anymore. So you bring the people in, and then you throw them out.
We just had a new prime minister yesterday.
Yeah, I know. It's all part of this cycle. And so what happens is they don't have the financial, and the people move. It's just logical, right? It's just when you're heavily indebted, and you're not as productive, and you've got large wealth gaps. What are you going to do? It's politics. You're going to say, I can't raise taxes because if I raise taxes, besides having great conflict, people are going to leave. Okay. So I can't cut benefits because those who are receiving whatever those benefits are the ones that are suffering them. And what am I going to do? Cut those benefits? So now, okay. But wait a second, I'm running a big deficit or I don't have enough money. So where does the money come from? How do I get out of not getting more in debt? And then what does that mean for the person who's lending to you? They don't want to lend to you, right? So you're not going to get the money to finance the deficits. It's mechanics.
So what is it they have to do to get out of that situation?
They're going to have a major restructuring. You're going to have to
go bankrupt.
Write down. Yeah, well, the way the central banks work now is they do a mixture of printing money, which produces inflation, and then restructuring the debt in some way, like maybe changing the maturity. And in these cycles, quite often they put in capital controls because they think people are leaving, so they don't want them to leave and take their money with them. So they put in capital controls that says you can't leave with your money, okay, and they'll have exit taxes. And that's the type of thing that happens until, there's a period of great turbulence. Then you, through a combination of restructuring the debt means like quite often you lengthen the maturity of the debt.
Okay.
I think what's needed is a strong middle.
What does that mean?
Right now, there's a left and right, and they're extreme. And as long as they're at war with each other, that's going to make things worse.
Yeah.
If you can find that middle course so that those at most extreme are more alienated than those who say, we're going to have to figure this out together. And then what I would do, that leadership, that core, I would have something like a bipartisan commission in which smart people, meaning who understand how economics and these things work, of both parties work together to come up with a small and difficult plan. In other words, you're going to have to make difficult changes in order to make that work well. But if you can achieve that, like sometimes in history, great leaders of opposing sides have been able to come up with a plan. I mean, that's how the Constitution was made. You come up with a plan for operating that way, and then you impose those difficult changes, And that when I say this, I say that that's very difficult and very long shot. But unless you have bipartisan support, unless you do it in a way where the pain is shared, and there's a sense that there is we're doing the right thing, as well as not a sense, just a reality of doing the right thing to make most people productive, that is the best path forward.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.